Hey everyone, and welcome to another Konoha Reviews. It's been a couple of weeks of my readjusting to Japan again, but I'm back in the seat and playing games to review them, so keep those suggestions for games you want me to review coming. Back at the end of 2018, the Spyro Reignited Trilogy was released for consoles, but it was only this month where we PC owners got our hands on this as well. I was very pleasantly surprised when I heard the announcement after they had released Crash Bandicoot on PC earlier as well. Back when I was a little Konoha, I absolutely adored 3D platformers and am still of the opinion that the Nintendo 64 era holds the best gems in terms of these type of games. Super Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, Rayman 2, Tonic Trouble, and many more could keep me busy and smiling for hours. The counterpart was of course the original PlayStation, and their platforming mascot was Crash Bandicoot. Now as a kid, I did not care so much for Crash. I much rather loved the cute and cuddly design of the Nintendo characters compared to the wacky, Cartoon Network-ish look of Crash. Later, when I did finally get around playing Crash Bandicoot, I did really like the games, but found them very limited, since the level design always had you going forward in a linear fashion. It was not designed with open worlds you could explore up and down like Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie. In their response, Insomniac then made Spyro the Dragon, a franchise that would finally introduce PlayStation owners to platformer with fully 3D environments. At the time of the release of the original Spyro, I did not own a PlayStation, but was very intrigued by the character design. It wasn't until the third entry in the series, Spyro the Year of the Dragon, that I finally got my hands on my first Spyro game. I had rented the game at the time at a video store, and absolutely adored the game. It was so distinctively different from many Nintendo 3D platformers that it really gave its own sense of identity. I then never laid my hands on another Spyro game with a different direction they went with the PlayStation 2 versions and also the Skylanders I let slip. But now, with the Reignited Trilogy, I could not wait to revisit that playthrough of the Year of the Dragon, but of course also experience Spyro's origins. So the Reignited Trilogy is a 3-game package deal for $40. You receive Spyro 1, 2, and 3, and can play each of them separately regardless of your progress in any of the 3 games. So you can immediately start with the third game if you so wish. But I started out with the first one. The first game is actually really straightforward and rather short. Despite feeling quite dense in the amount of worlds you visit and things you do, I was surprised to find out that you can easily complete this adventure in 4 to 5 hours. Spyro 2 is a bit longer, and Spyro 3 is by far the biggest game, giving you somewhere between 15 and 20 hours of gameplay for this $40 package, which is a very good deal in my book. In the first Spyro game, there's barely any story, something that the sequels improved upon, thankfully. In the first game, an evil bad guy by the name of Nasty Nork turns all the dragons in the world to emerald statues. It is up to Spyro to go to several worlds and free the dragons that are located here. There are 80 or so dragons to find, and basically they're your equivalent of stars like you have in the Mario games. Now before we talk about the gameplay, let's talk about the presentation first. I was surprised to find out that Spyro's original graphics on the PS1 have not aged very well at all. I looked up some footage on YouTube and found the game to be very ugly looking, with barren landscapes and blocky characters. It's interesting, since games like Banjo-Tooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and Donkey Kong 64 still look great, but had of course a bit more graphical power behind them with a Nintendo 64 and expansion pack. But with the Reignited Trilogy, the creators had called in the help of that trustworthy Unreal 4 engine, and my goodness, does the game look spick and span. It is just gorgeous to look at, with so much character and atmosphere. The colors just jump from your screen, and it really feels like a cartoon made by DreamWorks. All the characters and models are also varied and very well animated. From the enemies, some quirkier than the others, to the dragons you need to rescue, which are all very distinct and have their own flavor. It also has nice details, including grass that gets scorched when you breathe fire over it. Audio-wise, the voices has also been redone, which is a blessing as the original voices were god-awful. An absolute A+ for presentation there. So in Spyro, you visit multiple hub worlds, where you'll be heading through portals that will teleport you to smaller levels, much like you go through paintings in Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie for each level. This time around though, there's a bit more to do in the hub worlds themselves. Not only do many of the hub worlds have their own unique enemies in them, but also in order to complete the game 100%, you will need to collect the gems that are spread throughout. You see, in every regular level and hub world, there are a few hundred gems spread throughout, mostly around 400 to 500. They are literally everywhere and can be seen as the golden coins equivalent in the Mario games, but with one big exception, and that is that they do not reappear after you have already gotten them and revisit the level. This is such a small detail, but one that I like very much. It really gives you a sense that you are cleaning up a level and also gives you a hint of direction you haven't visited yet, which might tell you where to look for any missing gems or dragon statues. In each level, there are somewhere between 2 to 4 dragon statues that you will need to bump into to free the dragons themselves. When the dragons are freed, they say something quirky and then leave. That is basically the extent of the cutscenes in this game. The worlds in Spyro are all very varied and beautiful, though the worlds themselves did sometimes miss a flavor of their own. Don't get me wrong, they look beautiful, but some felt just like mere medieval castles or sandy deserts without an identity of their own. One reason why this is also the case is that the enemies feel really random sometimes. In a sense, there are always two archetypes you will find in these levels. One is a giant melee unit that you will have to blast with fire before it can hit you, and the other is a smaller type that wears something metal which you will need to head bump as their metal absorbs the heat. Despite that the skins, and in some ways patterns, will differ from level to level, you can still see this distinct two-way archetype, and it kinda wears on you after a while, especially since you will also encounter these types in Spyro 2 and 3. But there, they feel much more at home in the worlds they inhabit. There's also, unlike games like Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, no real objective or assignment connected to freeing the dragons. What I mean by this is that every time you would head into a painting in Mario, you would have to do something specific, like beat the Bob-omb boss or race the Koopa to the mountain in order to get a star. In Banjo-Kazooie this was the case too with getting the puzzle pieces, but that is not the case here, though they did luckily put that in Spyro 2 and 3. Because of this, Spyro 1 is the most basic of the 3 games and it really feels like it too. It's a great way to introduce you into the world of Spyro and its mechanics and designs, but it feels quite barren as a game itself once you take a step back. Nevertheless though, I did have a lot of fun with Spyro 1, though I don't see myself coming back to the game in the future as much as the second or third game. So one reason why I love the third Spyro game so much is that each level featured its own settings with its own story. From a bunch of lions in the ancient Greek age that were under attack by an army of rhino soldiers, to a group of mountain goat friends that were trying to go back home, or even a Tomb Raider-esque girl that required your help raiding tombs. There was always a backstory that, though simple, made the world and its enemies and creatures make more sense. In the first Spyro, all the creatures in the world almost always tried to kill you. But here, you had unique inhabitants that would talk to you to give you hints or assignments, and sometimes you would need their help as well to advance further. It made each world feel more alive with their own cute inhabitants in them that you will lend your aid towards. This unique take on presenting each world with its own unique inhabitants and story was actually introduced in Spyro 2, which I played for the very first time with this trilogy. Gone are the dragons you need to collect, and this time, you need to acquire a talisman in each world by performing a specific assignment, like beating a Yeti monster that haunts some Buddhist monks that love hockey, or free a tribal chief from a group of Eskimos that have come under attack from ice monsters. Each level is introduced and ended with a short cute cutscene, and it just makes everything way more coherent and fun to be in. By doing this, different types of small gameplay changes get introduced as well, which is of course a very welcome addition. In some levels, you will have to defeat specific enemies, so that the friendly inhabitants will open doors for you to proceed, and in others you will have to collect light bulbs scattered around in order to open electrical fields, and in another level, you need to escort baby turtles back to safety. You are always excited and curious about what awaits you next. I will say though that the design of the characters that you will help and vice versa is not as good as in Spyro 3, mostly because almost all of those are animal creatures that have funny little traits and accents, while here you will sometimes be helping very weird looking humanoid creatures or actual people as well. It's not as interesting. Within each world, there's much more to do than just collect the talisman though. There are orbs you need to collect, 64 in all, and you get these by completing specific objectives. Now it's starting to look more like the Mario and Banjo-Kazooie games we all know and love. What is also a nice touch is that multiple mini-games get introduced that, if completed, will grant you these orbs as well. Mini-games like Ice Hockey are just a blast to play and vary up the gameplay of this game even more. Spyro 2 is just more fun and interesting than its predecessor, and now has a standalone story about Spyro accidentally traveling to another world where he makes new friends and a new enemy in the form of Ripto. This time, there are plenty of cutscenes and they're all done very well and look as colorful and vibrant as ever. But with the gameplay shift towards performing objectives instead of finding the statues, some people that might enjoy the collectathon type of platform games might feel something lacking with Spyro 2. And therefore I present to you Spyro 3 Year of the Dragon, the absolute favorite of mine out of all these 3 games, though it might also be because that was the only one I had played back in the day. It was my introduction to the Spyro world, and with this being the 3rd part, it was just chock full of content and variety. And the best is that this game takes the best of both games that came prior to it and combines it. In the story of Spyro 3, all the dragon eggs are stolen by a mysterious enemy, and it is up to Spyro to travel to multiple lands and get them back. In order to get them back, you often will need to do a specific task, sometimes multiple, but we'll also find plenty of eggs just laying around in the world. So this combines the collecting statues from the first game with the objective-based gameplay from the second. It's a win-win for everyone. This time also, there's a much higher focus on Spyro's new sidekick friends who you'll be playing as from time to time. There's the jumpy female kangaroo who can jump very high and stomp enemies, or a very funny penguin soldier who has more action-based gameplay up its sleeves. I was pleasantly surprised to find that they had gotten significant do-overs on their looks, making them so much less generic and add much more flavor and uniqueness to them. Spyro 3 also introduced fun minigames like racing, skateboard sections, and more. Spyro 3 really is for me the perfect marriage, with each stage being so unique with its cuddly characters and fun, varied gameplay. In the end, I feel you cannot go wrong with the Spyro collection. The first game is definitely the weakest, and it is even bound to receive some criticism in how shallow some of its mechanics and designs are, but part 2 and 3 make up for that. If you love platformers, or games that offer just a lot of varied gameplay that will keep you entertained and doing something new every 5 minutes, then please check out this gem of a game package. For those who never have played Spyro and love these types of games, it is an absolute must-buy. In the end, I will give Spyro Reignited Trilogy an 8.4. I was very entertained and charmed by its presentation and gameplay through and through, and it is a staple of how good some of the games were back in the day. It got me so hooked to 3D platformers again that I cannot wait to revisit games like Banjo-Tooie or play ones that I've never played before, like Yooka-Laylee or Hat in Time. If any of you know any good platformers out there, definitely let me know. Hope to see you all on another Klonoa Reviews.